I'm Talia Ruiz, 24 years old. Until last month, I believed that family meant everything, that blood was thicker than water, and that love meant sacrifice without question. Then my stepdad Eddie handed me my packed bags on our front porch and told me they needed space. The shock hit me like ice water. I'd been paying our rent for 3 years, working double shifts at the diner and weekend gigs cleaning offices. Also, my mom, Eddie, and my little sister Zoe could stay in our duplex on Maple Street. I never asked for gratitude or recognition. I just wanted them safe. But as I stood there holding my entire life in 2 duffel bags, one question burned through my mind louder than Eddie's weak explanations or my mother's guilty silence. How do you get kicked out of a home you've been paying for? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The duplex on Maple Street wasn't much to look at from the outside. Paint peeled from the wooden siding like old sunburn, and the front steps sagged under the weight of too many Pennsylvania winters. But it was home. Or at least, it had been home for the past 5 years, ever since Mom met Eddie at the grocery store where she worked part-time stocking shelves. I remember the day we moved in. I was 19, fresh out of high school with dreams of community college, and maybe someday becoming a social worker. Zoe was 9 then, all knobby knees and gap-toothed. Grins, carrying her stuffed elephant everywhere. Mom seemed lighter somehow, hopeful in a way I hadn't seen since Dad left when I was 12. Eddie had presented the duplex like a gift. Better than that apartment, he'd said, gesturing broadly at the narrow rooms and single bathroom we'd been crammed into for 3 years. Zoe can have her own room. You too, Talia. We'll be a real family. The rent was $800 a month, more than Mom made at the grocery store, but Eddie worked construction and promised his paychecks would cover it. For the first year, they mostly did. I was working part-time at Sal's Diner downtown, saving money for school and helping with groceries when things got tight. But construction work in Westbridge was seasonal and unpredictable. By the second winter, Eddie was laid off more often than he was working. The electric bill went unpaid in January, then the water bill in February. I watched Mom's face grow pinched with worry, saw her counting and recounting the bills at the kitchen table after she thought we were asleep. That's when I made the decision that would define the next 3 years of my life. I picked up a second job cleaning offices on weekends and quietly took over the rent payments. It started as temporary help just until Eddie got back on his feet. But temporary stretched into months, then years. I never announced it or made a big deal about it. I just made sure the landlord got his money on the first of every month. When Mom asked how we were managing, I'd shrug and say Eddie must have found some side work. She seemed relieved not to dig deeper. The house settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mom kept her job at the grocery store more for the health insurance than the paycheck. Eddie picked up work when he could, contributing just enough to keep up appearances. Zoe flourished in high school, making honor roll and joining the drama club. She had friends over for sleepovers and movie nights, something that would have been impossible in our old, cramped apartment. I told myself I was investing in their happiness. This was what family did. You took care of each other. My college dreams could wait. There would be time for my own life later. The kitchen became the heart of our routine. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:30 to make coffee and pack Zoe's lunch before my early shift at the diner. The coffee maker was an ancient thing that groaned and sputtered, but it produced a decent cup that helped ease me into the day. I'd stand at the counter, watching the sun creep over the neighbor's fence, listening to the house wake up around me. Mom would shuffle down in her bathrobe, always surprised to find coffee already made. You don't have to do this every morning. she'd say, but she'd accept the mug gratefully. Adding too much sugar and a splash of vanilla creamer, Eddie rarely appeared before 8, emerging from their bedroom already dressed for whatever work he'd managed to line up. He was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of manual labor, with calloused hands and a beard he kept neatly trimmed. He had a way of filling a room, not with noise, but with presence, like he deserved whatever space he occupied. He was never unkind to me, exactly, but there was always a distance, a formality that reminded me I was Rose's daughter, not his. He called me kiddo or tall, in the careful way you might address your neighbor's child. Friendly but not intimate. Zoe was different. She was ours in a way that transcended blood relations. She'd been so young when Eddie came into our lives that she barely remembered a time without him. He walked her to school on his days off, helped with her math homework, and cheered loudest at her school plays. Watching them together, I sometimes felt a stab of something I couldn't quite name, not jealousy, exactly, but a recognition of something I'd never had. My own relationship with Eddie was cordial but careful. We shared the same space, ate meals at the same table, and made small talk about the weather or the news. But I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying not to take up too much space or voice too many opinions. It was easier to keep my head down, work my shifts, and focus on keeping the family stable. The living room held our most treasured possession, a photo from Zoe's 10th birthday last spring. Mom had splurged on a small cake from the bakery, and we gathered around the kitchen table to sing. In the picture, we're all laughing at something Zoe said, caught in a moment of genuine joy. Eddie's arms around Mom's shoulders. Zoe is making bunny ears behind my head, and I'm grinning with chocolate frosting on my chin, looking at that photo now. I can see what I missed then. The way Eddie's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes when he looks at me, the subtle way he positions himself between Mom and me. The signs were there, written in body language I was too naive or too hopeful to read. The cracks in our family portraits started small. Eddie would make comments about the house feeling crowded, about how nice it would be to have more privacy. He'd suggest that maybe it was time for me to think about getting my own place, the way most people my age did. It's not healthy, he'd say to Mom when he thought I couldn't hear. She should be out there living her own life, not playing house with us. Mom would murmur something non-committal in response, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The seed of doubt had been planted. I started spending more time at work, picking up extra shifts to give them space and to avoid the growing tension in the house. Sal's Diner became my refuge, a place where I knew my role and my value. The regulars knew my name, asked about my family, and left decent tips. Mrs. Patterson always requested my section and would slip me an extra $5 with a wink. For college, she'd say, though I'd stopped mentioning college plans months ago. The diner was a throwback to the 1950s, all red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floors. The coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and the atmosphere was comfortable in a way that made people linger over their meals. I learned to read customers' moods, to know when someone needed friendly chatter and when they preferred to be left alone with their thoughts. Jordan worked the espresso machine, a recent addition that Sal had installed reluctantly after too many customers asked for fancy coffee drinks. Jordan was a year older than me. With an art degree, they were slowly paying off in dreams of becoming a freelance graphic designer. They had short curly hair that they dyed a different color every few months in a collection of vintage band t-shirts that rotated through their work wardrobe. We developed an easy friendship over shared late shifts and mutual complaints about difficult customers. Jordan had a way of cutting through nonsense with sharp humor and uncomfortable truths. They lived in a studio apartment above the vintage clothing store downtown. paying $600 a month for a space barely larger than my bedroom. No, you're basically their sugar mama, right? Jordan said one evening as we closed up together. They were wiping down the espresso machine while I counted the register. I laughed uncomfortably. It's not like that. It's family. Family doesn't usually kick in $800 a month without acknowledgement, Jordan replied, not looking up from their task. When was the last time Eddie even said thank you? I couldn't remember, which was answer enough. The question stuck with me as I drove home that night, my beat-up Honda struggling up the hill to Maple Street. The house was dark except for the porch light Mom always left on for me. I sat in the driveway for a moment, looking at the peeling paint and crooked shutters, trying to see it through Jordan's eyes. Was I enabling them? Or was I doing what needed to be done to keep my family together? Inside, the house was quiet. Zoe had left her backpack by the front door, homework spilling out across the floor. I gathered it up and set it neatly on the hall table, the way I did every night. In the kitchen, I found the dishes from dinner still in the sink and loaded them into the dishwasher before heading upstairs. My room was the smallest of the 3 bedrooms, tucked under the eaves with slanted ceilings that made it feel like a cave. But it was mine. I'd painted the walls a soft blue and hung string lights around the window. A bookshelf held my collection of novels and the few textbooks I bought for the community college classes I planned to take. The textbooks were dusty now, relics of abandoned dreams. I changed into my pajamas and pulled out my laptop, opening the spreadsheet where I tracked our household expenses. $800 for rent, $150 for electric, $80 for water, $40 for garbage pickup. Internet, phone, car insurance, groceries. The numbers marched down the screen in neat columns, a testament to 3 years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. At the bottom, I'd calculated my total contribution, almost $30,000 over 3 years. The number made my stomach clench. That was a year of college tuition, a reliable car, a down payment on my own apartment, but it was also Zoe's stability, Mom's peace of mind, and our family's survival. Wasn't that worth more than money? I closed the laptop and tried to fall asleep, but Jordan's words echoed in my mind. Sugar mama. The phrase felt harsh and transactional, reducing my love and sacrifice to something almost mercenary. Outside my window, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the distant hum of traffic on the main road. Ordinary sounds of a life that felt increasingly fragile, balanced on a foundation I built, but that belonged to everyone except me. The morning it all fell apart. Started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 5:30, made coffee, and packed Zoe's lunch while she rushed around upstairs getting ready for school. Eddie was already gone. He'd mentioned something about an early job site the night before. Mom sat at the kitchen table, in her uniform, scrolling through her phone with that distant expression she'd been wearing more often lately. I might be late tonight, I told her, refilling her coffee mug. Sal asked me to cover the dinner shift for Maria. Mom nodded without looking up. Okay, honey. The lack of eye contact should have been my first warning. Mom had always been a morning person, chatty and warm over coffee. But lately, she'd been withdrawn, distracted. I attributed it to stress at work. The grocery store had been cutting hours, and she'd been worried about her job security. I kissed the top of her head and grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. See you tonight. The day at the diner passed in its usual blur of coffee refills, order taking, and small talk with regulars. Jordan worked the lunch shift with me, and we fell into our comfortable rhythm of good-natured banter and shared eye rolls at difficult customers. Around 2 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson came in for her usual slice of apple pie and decaf coffee. She was in her 70s, a retired teacher who lived alone since her husband passed. She'd been coming to Sal's for as long as I'd worked there, always requesting my section. "How's that family of yours?" she asked as I set down her pie. "They're good," I said automatically. "Zoe's got a big history test tomorrow. And your mother? Still working at Kroger's?" "Yeah, still there." Mrs. Patterson studied my face with the sharp attention that had probably made her a formidable teacher. "You look tired, dear. Are you taking care of yourself?" The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked about my well-being? "I'm fine. Just picking up extra shifts. Make sure you save some energy for your own dreams," she said gently. "It's easy to get so caught up in taking care of everyone else that you forget to take care of yourself." I forced a smile and moved on to my next table, but her words lingered. Between the lunch rush and dinner prep, I found myself thinking about dreams I'd set aside. Goals I'd postponed indefinitely. The dinner shift was busier than usual, and by the time we closed at 9, I was exhausted. Jordan had left at 6, but not before reminding me about their standing offer. "My couch is always available if you need to crash," they'd said, only half joking. That studio might be tiny, but at least nobody expects me to pay their bills. I'd laughed it off, but the offer felt more tempting than it should have. The drive home took 15 minutes through quiet suburban, streets lined with modest houses and old oak trees. Maple Street was darker than usual. The streetlight at the corner had been burned out for weeks, and nobody had bothered to report it. As I turned into our driveway, something looked wrong. There were shapes on the front porch that shouldn't have been there. I parked and walked closer, my heart beginning to race as the shapes resolved into familiar objects. My suitcases, both of them, sitting neatly beside the front door like luggage. Waiting for a taxi. My hands shook as I climbed the porch steps. The suitcases were packed full, bulging at the seams. My laptop bag sat on top of the larger one. A garbage bag beside them contained what looked like clothes and shoes. I tried the front door, locked out my key, turned in the lock, but the door only opened a few inches before hitting the chain. Through the gap, I could see the living room lamp casting warm light across familiar furniture. "Mom?" I called through the crack. "What's going on?" I heard footsteps, and then Eddie appeared at the door. His face was carefully neutral, like he was delivering bad news he'd rehearsed. "Hey, Tal, we need to talk." "Why are my things on the porch?" He unlatched the chain and opened the door wider, but didn't invite me in. Behind him, I could see Mom sitting on the couch, not looking in our direction. "Look, this isn't easy," Eddie began. "But Rosa and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to find your own place." The words hit me like physical blows. "What? You're 24. Most people your age are living independently, starting their own lives. It's not healthy for you to be here playing house with us." "Playing house?" My voice came out higher than intended. "I've been paying the rent, Eddie, for 3 years. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or annoyance that I brought. "Up, money." "We appreciate the help, but we never asked you to do that." "That was your choice." "My choice?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You were about to lose this place. I kept you from being evicted. We would have figured something out. How? You've been unemployed more than you've been working. Mom makes barely enough to cover groceries." Eddie's jaw tightened. "That's between Raza and me. You're not responsible for our finances." "But I am responsible for paying them. Nobody asked you to?" The circular logic was making my head spin. I looked past Eddie to where Mom sat hunched on the couch, still not making eye contact. "Mom?" I called. "Can you please look at me?" She turned slowly, and I saw tears on her cheeks. I'm sorry, Mia. This is what's best. Best for who? For everyone. You need to live your own life. This is my life. This is my family. Eddie stepped slightly forward, blocking more of my view of the living room. We need space, Talia. Privacy. Room to be a married couple without a kid around. A kid? I'm 24 years old, and I've been supporting this household. We never asked you to support anything, he interrupted. That was your decision, your choice to insert yourself into adult responsibilities. The unfairness of it took my breath away. For 3 years, I'd worked myself to exhaustion to keep this family stable. I'd given up college, social life, and any chance at independence, and now I was being told it was unwanted interference. Where am I supposed to go? Eddie shrugged. You're an adult. You'll figure it out. Tonight? You want me to find somewhere to live tonight? You have friends, don't you? Someone can let you crash for a few days while you look for a place. I thought of Jordan's tiny studio, their standing offer that had seemed like a joke until this moment. You've really thought this through. We've been discussing it for a while, Eddie said. This isn't sudden, but it was sudden to me. Completely blindsiding. How long have you been planning this? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. I've been living here thinking I was part of this family, and apparently you've been having secret meetings about getting rid of me. We're not getting rid of you, Mom said from the couch, her voice thick with tears. You'll always be my daughter. Just not your daughter who lives here. It's time, Mia. You need to build your own life. I wanted to scream that this was my life, that I built it around their needs and their stability. Instead, I looked at my suitcases sitting on the porch like evidence of my eviction. What about Zoe? What about her? Does she know you're kicking me out? Eddie and Mom exchanged a look I couldn't read. She understand, Mom said finally. She's at her friend Madison's house for the night, Eddie added. We thought it would be easier this way. Easier for whom, I wondered. Certainly not for Zoe. Who would come home tomorrow to find her sister gone without warning or explanation? Can I at least get the rest of my things? Eddie looked uncomfortable. Everything's already out here. I gestured at the suitcases and garbage bag. This is everything? 3 years of my life fits in 2 suitcases. We packed what seemed most important. If there's something specific you need, you can let us know. The clinical way he talked about my belongings, my life, made me feel like a stranger. Worse than a stranger, like an unwanted guest who had overstayed their welcome. My books? My photos? We can arrange a time for you to come back for the rest, Mom said, when things have settled down. Settled down from what? From you throwing me out of my home? This isn't your home, Eddie said quietly. It's our home. Roseanne. Mine. The words landed like a slap. I've been living under the illusion that I belonged here, that my financial contribution and emotional investment had earned me a place in this family. But Eddie was right. My name wasn't on the lease. I was just a tenant who'd been given notice. The rent's due next week, I said, grasping for some kind of leverage. What are you going to do about that? Eddie's expression didn't change. We'll manage. How? That's not your concern anymore. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. They were kicking out their primary source of income and telling me not to. Worry about how they'd survive. But looking at Eddie's set jaw and Mom's tear-stained face, I realized this conversation was over. They'd made their decision, and nothing I said would change their minds. I picked up my laptop bag, slinging it over my shoulder. The weight of it felt strange. like I was carrying the last pieces of a life that no longer existed. I need to make some calls, I said. Figure out where I'm staying tonight. Of course, Eddie said, stepping back as if to close the door. Wait, I turned to look at Mom one more time. Is this really what you want? She met my eyes briefly, then looked away. I want you to be happy, Mia, to have your own life. I was happy here with you. You can't build your whole life around taking care of us. Why not? She didn't have an answer for that. I pulled out my phone and called Jordan, my fingers shaking as I dialed. Hey, what's up? Jordan's voice was cheerful, probably expecting a complaint about a difficult customer or a funny story from the dinner shift. Are you serious about that couch offer? The line went quiet for a moment. What happened? I looked at my packed belongings. At the closed door of the house I've been paying to maintain. I need somewhere to stay tonight, maybe longer. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Jordan said without hesitation. Send me your address. I sat down on the porch steps next to my suitcases and waited. Through the window, I could see Eddie and Mom talking in the living room, their heads close together. Mom was crying again. Eddie had his arm around her shoulders, comforting her like she was the victim in the situation. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When Jordan's car pulled up, I felt a rush of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Someone was coming for me. Someone cared enough to drop everything and drive across town to help. Jordan got out of their beat-up Toyota and looked at the scene me sitting with my luggage, like a refugee from my own life. Jesus, they said. What the hell happened? They decided they need space. Space from what? From me, apparently. Jordan's expression darkened as they looked toward the house. And they just packed your stuff and put it outside? Like you're some kind of squatter? Pretty much. That's fucked up, Talia. That's really fucked up. Hearing someone else acknowledge the wrongness of it made me feel less crazy. For a moment on the porch, I'd started to wonder if maybe Eddie was right, if I really had been inserting myself where I wasn't wanted. Come on, Jordan said, picking up one of my suitcases. Let's get you out of here. As we loaded my belongings into Jordan's car, I took one last look at the house. The porch light was still on, casting the same warm glow it had every night when I came home from work. But now it felt like a spotlight on my exile, illuminating exactly how unwelcome I'd become. Through the living room window, I could see the family photo from Zoe's birthday still sitting on the side table. In a few hours, when she came home from her sleepover, she'd walk into a house where her sister no longer lived. No goodbye, no explanation, no warning. That might be the thing I never forgive them for, not just what they did to me, but what they did to her. Jordan's studio apartment was exactly as advertised, tiny but comfortable, with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in morning light. The main room served as living area, bedroom, and office, with a Murphy bed that folded down from the wall and a desk tucked into the corner. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person, consisting of a mini fridge, hot plate, and microwave, stacked on a narrow counter. It's not much, Jordan said, setting my suitcase down by the door, but it's home. I looked around the small space, trying to imagine how two people would fit here even temporarily. Are you sure about this? I can probably find somewhere else. Stop, Jordan interrupted. You're staying here as long as you need to. End of discussion. The kindness in their voice almost broke me. After hours of feeling unwanted and disposable, having someone choose to help me felt overwhelming. Jordan pulled the bed down from the wall with practiced efficiency. You take the bed, I'll crash on the floor tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out a better arrangement. I can't take your bed. You're not taking it. I'm giving it to you. Jordan grabbed pillows and a sleeping bag from the closet. Besides, I fall asleep at my desk half the time anyway. This won't be much different. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation with Eddie was wearing off, leaving me hollow and shaky. I keep thinking they'll call, I said, staring at my phone. Like maybe they'll realize this was a mistake and ask me to come. Back. Jordan looked up from arranging their makeshift bed on the floor. Do you want them to call? The question caught me off guard. Did I want to go back to a family that had secretly been planning my removal? To parents who saw my financial support as unwanted interference rather than love in action? I want them to realize what they've lost, I said finally. I want them to understand what I sacrificed for them. And if they don't? I didn't have an answer for that dot the next morning. I woke up disoriented, forgetting for a moment where I was. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows, and the sounds of the street below were different from what I was used to. It took several seconds for the previous night to come flooding back, the suitcases on the porch, Eddie's casual dismissal, Mom's tearful insistence that this was for the best. Jordan was already up, standing at the hot plate making coffee in a French press that looked expensive and out of place in the tiny kitchen. Morning, they said, not turning around. Sleep, okay? Better than I expected. It was true. Despite everything, I'd slept deeply. The kind of exhausted sleep that comes after emotional trauma. Coffee's almost ready. Fair warning, it's strong. I need rocket fuel to function before 9 a.m. I sat up in bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I should shower. Get ready for work. Your shift doesn't start until 11. We have time to talk first. Jordan poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and handed me one. The liquid was dark as motor oil and twice as potent. It cleared my head instantly. So, Jordan said, settling cross-legged on the floor with their own mug. What's the plan? I don't know. Find an apartment, I guess. Somewhere I can afford on my salary. That's the what. I'm asking about the how. Do you have money saved? The question made my stomach clench. Some, not much. How much is not much? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, dreading what I'd find. $800, Jordan whistled low. That's it. After working 2 jobs for years, everything else went to rent and bills. The admission felt shameful, like confessing to financial irresponsibility rather than family loyalty. Jesus, Talia, you've been broke this whole time? Not broke. Just ... Committed elsewhere. Jordan set down their coffee mug with a sharp clank. You know what this is, right? This is financial abuse. It's not abuse. It's family. Family doesn't take your money for years and then kick you out when you're inconvenient. I wanted to argue, to defend Mom and Eddie somehow, but the words wouldn't come. How do you defend people who had methodically planned your removal while accepting your financial support? I need to call in sick today, I said, changing the subject. Figure out how to find a place to live. You're not calling in sick. You need that job now more than ever. Jordan was right, but the thought of putting on my uniform and pretending everything was normal felt impossible. I can't face people right now. What if they ask about my family? What if Mrs. Patterson asks how everyone is? You tell them the truth. Or you tell them it's personal. But you don't blow off work because you're embarrassed. The word embarrassed hit home. That's exactly what I was embarrassed that I'd been so thoroughly rejected by the people. I'd sacrificed everything for Jordan seemed to read my expression. This isn't your shame to carry, you know? They're the ones who should be embarrassed. Are they, though? Because they seem pretty comfortable with their decision. That says more about them than it does about you. I finished my coffee and stood up, needing movement to settle my restless energy. The studio suddenly felt claustrophobic, like the walls were pressing in. I should get ready for work. Showers through there, Jordan pointed to a door barely. Wide enough for a person to fit through. Towels are on the shelf above the toilet. The bathroom was predictably tiny but clean and functional. I stood under the hot water longer than necessary, letting it wash away the feeling of displacement and confusion. When I emerged, Jordan had laid out a work shirt they'd borrowed from the diner's lost and found. Yours was wrinkled, they explained. This should fit. The small kindness anticipating my needs, solving a problem I hadn't even identified, yet made my throat tight with emotion. Thank you, I managed. Don't get weird about it, it's just a shirt. But it wasn't just a shirt. It was evidence that someone was paying attention, that someone cared about my well-being without expecting anything in return. The morning shift at Sal's passed in a haze of muscle memory. I took orders, poured coffee, and made small talk with regulars, all while feeling like I was watching someone else live my life. Mrs. Patterson came in for her usual breakfast and asked how I was doing. Fine, I said automatically. She studied my face with sharp eyes. You look tired, dear. Everything all right at home? The question almost broke my careful composure. Just some family stuff. Nothing I can't handle. Mrs. Patterson reached across the table and patted my hand. Family can be complicated. Sometimes the people who love us most don't know how to show it. I nodded, not trusting my voice. But don't let other people's limitations define your worth, she continued. You're a good girl, Talia. Anyone who can't see that is blind. I excused myself to refill coffee pots, blinking back tears in the kitchen. Sal looked up from the grill where he was flipping pancakes. You okay, kid? You seem off today. Sal was. In his 60s, a former Marine who'd opened the diner 30 years ago after his discharge. He was gruff but fair, and he'd always treated his employees like family. Just tired, I said. You working too much. I keep telling you kids money ain't everything. You gotta live a little too. If only he knew how little I'd been living. How little I'd been keeping for myself. Around noon, during the lull between breakfast and lunch rushes, my phone rang. For a split second, my heart leaped. Maybe it was Mom calling to apologize, to ask me to come home. But the caller ID showed Zoe's name. I stepped outside to take the call, my hands shaking as I answered. Talia? Zoe's voice was small and confused. What happened? Why are your things gone? The pain in her voice cut through me like a knife. This was what I dreaded most, having to explain to my 15-year-old sister why I disappeared without warning. Where are you? I asked. I'm at Madison still. I called home this morning and Mom said you moved out. But you didn't tell me you were moving out. I didn't know I was moving out. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Zoe spoke again, her voice was even smaller. What do you mean? How do you explain to a teenager that sometimes parents make decisions that don't make sense, that hurt the people they're supposed to protect? Mom and Eddie decided I should find my own place, I said carefully. But why? What did you do? I didn't do anything wrong, Zoe. Sometimes adults make decisions that are hard to understand. Where are you staying? With my friend Jordan from work. Just temporarily, while I look for an apartment. Are you coming back? The question hung between. You was loaded with hope and fear. I wanted to promise her that everything would work out, that our family would be okay, but I couldn't lie to her. I don't know, I said honestly. Zoe started crying then. Soft hiccuping sobs that broke my heart. I don't want you to leave. This doesn't feel like home without you. Oh, honey, I don't want to leave either. Then why are you? Can't you just come back? It's not that simple. Why not? If you want to stay and I want you to stay, why can't you just stay? Because sometimes what children want and what adults decide are two different things, I thought. Because your mother chose her husband over her daughter. Because I've learned that love doesn't always mean acceptance. I'm going to be okay, I said and said, and you're going to be okay too. But we won't be together. No, we won't be living together anymore. I hate this, Zoe whispered. I hate them for doing this to you. Don't hate them. They're still your parents, and they love you. They loved you too, and look what they did. The conversation was getting too heavy, too complicated for a phone call. Can you meet me somewhere? After school, maybe? We can talk properly. I don't know if they'll let me. The idea that my access to my own sister might be controlled or restricted made my chest tight with anger. Ask them, tell them I want to see. You! Okay, I'll try. After we hung up, I sat on the back steps of the diner, trying to process the conversation. Zoe's pain was almost harder to bear than my own. At least I understood what was happening, even if I didn't agree with it. She was just a kid caught in the middle of adult decisions. She had no power to influence. Jordan found me there when their shift started. Rough phone call, my sister. She came home and found out I was gone. Shit, they didn't even tell her first. I shook my head. They thought it would be easier if she was at a friend's house when it happened. Easier for who? That seems to be the theme here, what's easier for the adults involved. Jordan sat down beside me on the steps. What did you tell her? The truth, or as much of it as a 15-year-old can handle. How did she take it? About how you'd expect. She wants to know why, and I don't have a good answer for her. Because there isn't a good answer. This is fucked up. And she's smart enough to recognize that. We sat in silence for a moment, watching cars pass on the street, the normalcy of it, people going about their daily lives. Unaware of the small tragedy playing out on the diner's back steps felt surreal. I need to start looking for apartments, I said finally. We can do that tonight. Check Craigslist, drive around neighborhoods. But Talia, yeah? Don't take the first place you see just because you're desperate. You deserve somewhere decent. To live, the word deserve felt foreign. I'd spent so long focused on what other people deserved. Mom deserved security. Zoe deserved stability. Eddie deserved respect in his own home that I'd forgotten to consider what I might deserve. I don't know how much I can afford, I admitted. What's your monthly income? I did quick math in my head. About $800 if I keep both jobs. So you can afford maybe $600 in rent, keeping it under a third of your income. $600 would get me a studio like Jordan's, if I was lucky. More likely, it would get me a room in someone else's house, or a basement apartment with no natural light. It's not going to be glamorous, I said. Glamorous is overrated. Safe and affordable is what matters. That evening, we spent hours scrolling through rental listings on Jordan's laptop. Most places within my budget were either sketchy neighborhoods or rooms in houses with multiple roommates. A few looked promising until we called and learned about hidden fees, required deposits, or lease terms I couldn't meet. This is depressing, I said after the 10th disappointing phone call. It's a starting point, Jordan corrected. Rome wasn't built in a day, and your new life won't be either. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I hoped it might be Mom reaching out from a number I didn't recognize. Instead, it was Zoe, texting from her friend's phone. They said I can see you Saturday afternoon. Madison's? Mom can drive me to meet you somewhere. Relief flooded through me. At least I wouldn't lose contact with Zoe completely. I texted back, "Meet me at the park on 5th Street at 2 p.m., the one with the good swings." It was where I used to take her when she was little, when we'd spend Saturday afternoons pushing her higher and higher while she shrieked with delight. Now it would be where I tried to explain why everything had changed, why the family she'd known was breaking apart. "Good news?" Jordan asked, noticing my expression. "I get to see my sister on Saturday." That's something. It was something. In a week where I'd lost almost everything familiar, it was a small thread connecting me to the life I'd known. I held onto it like a lifeline, proof that some bonds couldn't be severed by other people's decisions. Living in Jordan's studio for a week taught me things about myself I never had to learn. I discovered that I talked to myself while getting ready in the morning, a habit that had been masked by the constant noise of family life. I learned that I preferred my coffee slightly weaker than Jordan's motor oil brew, but I was too polite to ask them to change their routine. Most importantly, I realized how much space I'd been occupying in my mother's house while somehow taking up no space at all. In the studio, every movement had to be negotiated. When Jordan worked at their desk, I read on the bed with headphones on. When I needed to get ready for work, Jordan retreated to the tiny kitchen area. We developed a wordless choreography of shared space that was both more considerate and more intentional than anything I'd experienced living with family. "You don't have to tiptoe around," Jordan said Thursday morning, watching me carefully fold my clothes into microscopic piles to minimize my presence. "This is your space too for now." But it wasn't my space, not really. I was a guest in someone else's life, dependent on their kindness and trying not to wear out my welcome. The awareness of being temporarily housed, potentially disposable, sat heavy in my chest. Thursday afternoon brought my first real apartment viewing, a basement studio in a house 20 minutes from downtown. The landlord, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, met me at the side entrance that led directly to the basement level. "It's small," she warned, unlocking the door, "but it's clean and quiet." Small was an understatement. The space was maybe 300 square feet, with a narrow window near the ceiling that let in a sliver of natural light. The kitchenette consisted of a mini fridge, hot plate, and sink tucked into one corner. The bathroom was barely large, enough to turn around in. $500 a month, first and last month's rent up front, the landlord said. Utilities included except internet. I walked the perimeter of the space, trying to imagine living here. $1,000 up front would wipe out my savings completely, leaving me nothing for security deposits on utilities or emergency expenses. "Can I think about it?" I asked. The landlord shrugged. "Sure, but I've got 3 other people looking at it this week. First come, first served." The pressure to decide immediately felt familiar, the same urgent desperation that had colored my family's financial crisis for years. But this time, I was the one who might end up homeless if I couldn't make the numbers work. I spent Thursday evening running calculations on my phone's calculator app. $500 for rent, plus food, gas, phone bill, car insurance. If I was careful and ate a lot of ramen, I could maybe make it work. But there would be no margin for error, no buffer for unexpected expenses. "It's a shithole," Jordan said bluntly. When I described the apartment, barely livable. "It's what I can afford." "Is it, though? What happens if your car breaks down? Or you get sick and miss work?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on securing shelter that I hadn't considered the larger picture of financial stability. "Maybe I can pick up more shifts," I said. "You're already working 60 hours a week. When would you sleep?" Jordan was right, but their practical concerns felt like luxury problems When I was facing potential homelessness, Friday brought a text from Mom. Can we talk? There are some things we need to discuss. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, emotions cycling through anger, hope, hurt, and confusion. Part of me wanted to ignore completely. They'd made their position clear when they packed my bags. But a larger part wondered if this was them reaching out, possibly to apologize or reconsider. I called her back during my afternoon break at the diner. Hi, Mia. Mom's voice was carefully neutral. You wanted to talk? Yes, about some practical things. Your mail is still coming here, and there are some items of yours we found that weren't in the original packing. My heart sank. This wasn't an apology or an invitation to come home. This is logistics. What kind of items? Some books, clothes in the laundry room, things like that. Also, your voter registration and insurance documents came in the mail. I can pick them up this weekend. Actually, that might not work. Eddie's been stressed about work, and he thinks it would be better if we met somewhere neutral instead. Somewhere neutral. Like, I was a threat to be managed rather than a daughter coming home. Fine, where? There's a coffee shop on Manning Street. Grind coffee. Can you meet me there Sunday at 10? I'll be there. And Talia, please don't make this difficult. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. The call ended before I could ask what she meant by difficult or challenge her definition. Of everyone. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I arrived at the park on 5th Street 30 minutes early, needing time to prepare myself for seeing Zoe. The playground was exactly as I remembered, swings with chain links polished smooth by thousands of hands, a climbing structure painted in primary colors, and the same graffitied picnic table where teenagers had been declaring their love for decades. I sat on one of the swings, gently rocking back and forth while I waited. A few families were scattered around the park, toddlers on the slide, a dad pushing his daughter on the merry-go-round. Normal Saturday afternoon scenes that felt like glimpses into a life I'd never quite managed to have dot at exactly 2 o'clock. I saw a minivan pull into the parking lot. Zoe jumped out of the passenger seat and ran toward me, her long hair streaming behind her. She'd grown taller in just the week since I'd seen her, or maybe emotional distance made her seem different. Somehow, Talia! She crashed into me with the force of a 15-year-old who'd been holding back tears all week. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo and the vanilla body spray she'd been obsessed with lately. I missed you so much, she whispered against my shoulder. I missed you too, baby girl. We held each other for a long moment while Madison's mom waited discreetly by the van, giving us space for our reunion. Come on, I said, leading Zoe to the picnic table. Tell me everything. How was school this week? How are you handling all this? Zoe's composure cracked immediately. It's awful. The house feels wrong without you there. Mom keeps crying when she thinks I'm not looking, and Eddie acts like nothing happened. What did they tell you about why I left? That you needed to start your own life. That it was time for you to be independent. Zoe's voice was flat, reciting words she clearly didn't believe. What do you think about that? I think it's bullshit, she said, then immediately looked guilty for swearing. Sorry, but I do. You didn't want to leave. They made you leave. The insight and maturity in her response broke my heart. At 15, she was already learning hard lessons about how families could fail the people they were supposed to protect. You're right, I said. I didn't want to leave, but sometimes adults make decisions that kids don't get a say in, even when those decisions affect them too. It's not fair. No, it's not fair. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a family pack up their picnic gear. The normalcy of their interactions, casual conversation. Shared responsibilities. Obvious affection felt like watching a foreign film without subtitles. Are you okay? Where you're staying, I mean? Zoe asked. I'm staying with my friend Jordan from work. Their place is tiny, but it's safe and warm. I'm looking for my own apartment. When will I see you again? The question I've been dreading. I wanted to promise her regular visits, weekly dinners, all the continuity we'd had before. But I didn't know what boundaries Mom and Eddie would set, what access they'd allow. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out, okay? This doesn't mean I'm disappearing from your life. Promise? I promise. You're my sister, and nothing changes that. Zoe reached into her backpack and pulled out a small wrapped package. I brought you something. Inside was a framed photo of the two of us from last Christmas morning, sitting on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper and laughing at something off camera. I remembered the moment Eddie had been trying to figure out how to work the new coffee maker Mom had given him, cursing at the instruction manual while we dissolved into giggles. I thought you might want something to remember us by, Zoe said quietly. Honey, I don't need a photo to remember you, but thank you. I'll keep this with me wherever I go. She also handed me a folded piece of paper, and this is from Mom. She asked me to give it to you. I unfolded the paper to find a brief note in Mom's careful handwriting. Mia, I know you don't understand this now, but someday you will. We love you. This is what's best. Mom, the note felt like a slap. The same dismissive phrases, the same refusal to acknowledge the pain they caused or take responsibility for their choices. Did you read this? I asked Zoe. She shook her head. She folded it and asked me to give it to you. What does it say? I considered lying, protecting Zoe from the casual cruelty of Mom's message, but she deserved honesty even when it hurt. She says she loves me and this is what's best. Zoe's face hardened in a way that looked too old for her 15 years. That's what adults say when they know they're doing something wrong. Her insight was startling and sad. What do you mean? When parents do something that hurts their kids, they always say it's for your own good or what's best. Like when Dad left, Mom said it was better for everyone. If he found happiness somewhere else, but it wasn't better for us. I'd forgotten how much Zoe remembered about our father's departure, how deeply it had affected her even at 9 years old. She was making connections between that abandonment and this one, recognizing patterns of adult selfishness disguised as sacrifice. You're very wise for 15, I said. I've had good teachers, she replied. Bumping my shoulder with hers, we spent another hour talking about school, her friends, her plans for the summer. Normal sisterly conversation that felt precious because I couldn't take it for granted anymore. Eventually, Madison's mom signaled that it was time to go. I'll text you, Zoe promised as we hugged goodbye. And maybe I can see you again next weekend. We'll see. I'm meeting your mom tomorrow to talk about some things. Maybe I'll know more after that. Tell her I want to keep seeing you. Tell her I need my sister. The drive back to Jordan's apartment gave me time to process the afternoon. Seeing Zoe had been wonderful and heartbreaking in equal measure. Wonderful because she was still the same bright, funny, insightful girl I'd helped raise. Heartbreaking because she was caught in the middle of adult decisions that made no sense. To her, or to me for that matter, Jordan was at their desk when I got back, working on a freelance project that involved designing logos for a local business. They looked up when I came in, reading my expression immediately. How did it go? Good and awful? Zoe's amazing, but she's hurting. And she's angry at Mom and Eddie for what they did. Smart kid. Too smart. She's already learned that sometimes parents prioritize their own comfort over their children's well-being. Jordan saved their work and turned to face me fully. That's a hard lesson, but it's not a wrong one. Better she learns it now than spends years wondering why she's not worth fighting for. The phrase hit home. Worth fighting for. Had I been worth fighting for? Apparently not enough for Mom to stand up to Eddie's desire for space and privacy. I'm meeting my mom tomorrow to pick up some of my things, I said. You want company? It's supposed to be neutral territory. Coffee shop. Even more reason to have backup. I can sit at another table just in case things get heated. The offer was thoughtful and practical. I'd been dreading the meeting, anticipating another conversation where my feelings were dismissed and my concerns minimized. That would be nice. Thank you. What are roommates for? The casual use of the word roommate made me smile. It was the first time Jordan had suggested this arrangement might be more than temporary emergency housing. That night, I lay awake thinking about Zoe's question, when will I see you again? The uncertainty of it felt like grief. For the first time in years, I didn't know when I'd see my sister, where I'd be living next month, or what my life would look like going forward. But mixed with the grief was something else, a tiny seed of possibility. For the first time in 3 years, my future wasn't predetermined by other people's needs. I could choose where to live based on what I wanted, not what I could afford to give away. I could make decisions about my own life without consulting a family that had made it clear I wasn't really part of their plans. It was terrifying and liberating. In equal measure, Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of Pennsylvania weather that makes everything look like a faded photograph. Jordan and I drove to grind coffee in relative silence, both of us uncertain about what to expect from my meeting with. Mom thought the coffee shop was busier than I'd anticipated for a Sunday morning, filled with college students hunched over laptops, and families lingering over late breakfasts. I spotted Mom immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, nervously shredding a napkin while staring out the window. I'll grab a table on the other side, Jordan said quietly. Text me if you need anything. I approached Mom's table with a mixture of hope and dread. Part of me still wanted this to be the conversation where she admitted they'd made a mistake, where she chose her daughter over her husband's comfort. But her body language, tense shoulders, downcast eyes, the defensive way she clutched her. Coffee mug suggested otherwise. Hi, Mom. She looked up, and I was shocked by how much older she looked. New lines around her eyes, gray roots showing in her hair, a tiredness that seemed bone deep. Mia, thank you for coming. Sit, please. I sat across from her, noting the careful distance she maintained, like I might be contagious with disappointment. You look thin, she said. Are you eating enough? The maternal concern felt jarring after a week of radio silence. I'm fine. Jordan seems nice. From work, you said? Small talk. We were making small talk like acquaintances instead of addressing the elephant in the room. Yes, we've worked together for 2 years. They're a good friend. Mom nodded, still avoiding direct eye contact. That's good. It's important to have friends. I waited for her to get to the point, but she seemed content to discuss my social life indefinitely rather than acknowledge why we were meeting in a coffee shop instead of our kitchen. You said you had some of my things, I prompted. Yes, right. Mom reached under the table and pulled out a canvas bag. Some clothes, your high school yearbooks, and the mail that's been coming. I looked through the bag, a few sweaters, some books I'd forgotten about, and a stack of official-looking envelopes. Insurance renewals, voter registration, a credit card offer. The detritus of an adult life that had been temporarily interrupted. I'll need to change my address for all of this, I said. Of course. Do you have a permanent address yet? Not yet. I'm still looking for a place. Mom's face flickered with something that might have been guilt or concern. How is that going? finding somewhere to live. It's challenging. Most places want first and last month's rent up front, plus security deposits. It's expensive to start. I wasn't trying to guilt trip her, just stating facts. But something in her expression shifted, like she was finally grasping the practical implications of their decision. I'm sure you'll find something. You're resourceful. Resourceful? Like being kicked out of my home was a puzzle to solve rather than a trauma to recover from? Mom, can I ask you something? She tensed. What? Do you actually think this was the right thing to do? Or are you just telling yourself that because it's easier than admitting you chose Eddie over me? The bluntness of the question seemed to catch her off guard. She started shredding another napkin, buying time before answering. It's not that simple, Talia, isn't it? He wanted me gone. You chose to make that happen. Seems pretty simple to me. You don't understand the pressure I was under. What pressure? Mom glanced around the coffee shop, as if checking to make sure no one was listening to our family drama. Eddie has been struggling with work, with feeling like he doesn't have a place in his own home. He needs to feel like the man of the house. And having me there threaten that somehow? You're very independent, very capable. Sometimes that made him feel unnecessary. I stared at her, processing the absurdity of what she was saying. So you kicked me out because my competence made your husband insecure. It's not about competence. It's about family dynamics. What about my family dynamics? What about the fact that I loved living with you all? That I wanted to be part of this family? Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. You can still be part of this family. You're always welcome to visit, but not to live there, not to belong there. You need to build your own life, Mia. You can't build it around taking care of us forever. Why not? I was happy taking care of you. I chose that. You were 21 when you started doing that. You didn't know what other choices were available. I wanted to scream at the condescension. In her voice, the way she dismissed my agency and autonomy. I'm 24 now, I still choose it. But it's not healthy. Says you, Eddie? Mom flinched. Says me. I'm your mother and I want what's best for you. What's best for me was having a family that appreciated my contribution instead of resenting it. We don't resent, yes, you do. Eddie resents that. I was supporting his household. You resent that my independence highlights your dependence. And instead of dealing with those feelings like adults, you decided to eliminate the problem by eliminating me. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they felt true. Mom started crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks. You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted to lose my daughter? You didn't lose me. You chose to give me up. I chose what I thought was best for everyone. No, you chose what was easiest for everyone except me. We sat in silence while Mom cried and I tried to control my anger. Around us, the normal sounds of the coffee shop continued conversations, espresso machine hissing, the clink of dishes. Life going on while my family fell apart. There's something else, Mom said finally, wiping her eyes with a fresh napkin. I waited. The rent situation. We need to discuss how we're going to handle that going forward. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Well, you've been paying it for so long. We need time to adjust our budget, figure out how to manage without that contribution. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to keep paying rent for a place I'm not allowed to live? Just temporarily, until Eddie can find steadier work. How temporarily? Maybe a few months? Just to give us time to transition. The audacity of it took my breath away. They'd kicked me out but still expected me to subsidize their lifestyle. While I struggled to find my own housing, absolutely not. Talia, please, we're family. Family doesn't ask someone to pay for housing they're denied access to. It's just until we get on our feet. You've had 3 years to get on your feet. I've been carrying you that entire time. Mom's tears turned angry. We never asked you to carry us. You never asked me to stop either. You took my money and let me believe I was part of something, but my sacrifice mattered. Your sacrifice didn't matter? No, it didn't. Because the moment I became inconvenient, you threw me away like I was nothing. I stood up, unable to sit through any more of this conversation. The entitlement was staggering, asking me to continue financing their life while building my own from scratch. I'm not paying your rent anymore, I said clearly. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. Talia, wait. But I was already walking away, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. Jordan looked up from their table as I passed, immediately reading the situation and following me out to the car. That looked like it went well, Jordan said once we were driving away. They want me to keep paying their rent. What? Even though I can't live there anymore? They want me to subsidize their housing while I figure out my own. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. Wow. That's really something. It is, isn't it? I keep thinking I'm overreacting, that maybe I'm being too sensitive. But that's insane, right? That's completely insane and exploitative. And cruel. Hearing someone else validate my reaction helped settle the doubt that had been gnawing at me. Maybe I wasn't being unreasonable. Maybe their expectations really were unreasonable. What are you going to do? Jordan asked. Exactly what I told her. They're on their own. But even as I said it, I felt a stab of worry. What would happen to Zoe if they couldn't make rent? What if they lost the house and she had to change schools, leave her friends? You're thinking about your sister, Jordan observed, reading my expression. How did you know? Because you're a good person who's been trained to feel responsible for everyone else's problems. The word trained hit home. That's exactly what it felt like, learned behavior, conditioned responses that made me feel guilty for setting boundaries. But Zoe will suffer if they can't afford the rent. Zoe is suffering already because her parents made a selfish decision. That's not your fault or your responsibility to fix. Intellectually, I knew Jordan was right. Emotionally, the idea of Zoe being displaced because I refused to enable our mother felt unbearable. It's hard to break the pattern, I admitted. Of course it is. You've been the family's safety net for 3 years. But safety nets are supposed to catch people temporarily, not support them permanently. We spent the rest of the drive in comfortable silence, both of us processing the morning's revelations. Back at the studio, I pulled out my phone and called the landlord of the basement apartment I'd viewed. Is the place still available? I asked. Yeah, but I need an answer today. I've got someone else coming to look at it this afternoon. I took a deep breath. I'll take it. Great. Can you come by with the deposit and first month's rent? I'll be there in an hour. After I hung up, Jordan looked at me with concern. Are you sure about this? That place was pretty grim. It's what I can afford, and it's mine. The distinction felt important. Not my family's space that I was graciously allowed to occupy. Not my friend's generous hospitality that I was grateful to receive. Mine. We drove to the bank where I withdrew $1,000 in cash, almost my entire savings. The teller looked concerned as she counted out the bills, probably wondering what kind of emergency required that much cash. Starting fresh, I told her, though she hadn't asked. The basement apartment looked even smaller in the afternoon light, but it was clean and functional. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, walked me through the basic utilities and house rules. Quiet hours after 10 p.m., she said. No overnight guests more than 2 nights a week. Rent is due on the 1st, late fees after the 5th. I signed the lease with a mixture of relief and terror. The monthly payment would stretch my budget to its breaking point, but it was shelter, independence, and the beginning of a life that belonged to me. When can I move in? I asked. Today, if you want. The previous tenant left it clean. Jordan helped me move my few belongings from their studio to my new place, a process that took exactly 1 carload. 2 suitcases, a garbage bag of clothes. My laptop and the framed photos Zoe had given me. The physical evidence of 24 years of life fit easily in a Honda Civic. It's got potential, Jordan said diplomatically, looking around the bare space. It's got 4 walls and indoor plumbing. That's enough for now. That night, I lay on an air mattress Jordan had loaned me, staring at the ceiling and listening to footsteps from the apartment above. For the first time in a week, I was truly alone, no roommate on the floor beside me. No family members moving around upstairs. The silence was both peaceful and terrifying. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Eddie. Your mother is very upset about your conversation today. She's been crying all afternoon. This is hard on everyone, not just you. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. I was done accepting responsibility for other people's emotional reactions to consequences they created. Tomorrow I would buy a cheap mattress and start building a life from nothing. Tonight, I would lie in my own space, in a home no one could take away from me, and try to figure out what came next. For the first time in years, the future was entirely up to me. 3 weeks into living in my basement apartment, I established a routine that felt like the beginning of a real life. Wake up at 6 a.m. to the sound of Mrs. Chun's grandson practicing violin upstairs. Coffee made on my single hot plate, strong enough to wake the dead. Walk to work because my car had developed a concerning rattling sound I couldn't afford to fix. The diner became my anchor point, the place where I felt most like myself. Salads started giving me the closing shifts more often, which meant better tips and fewer questions about why I looked tired. The work was familiar and comforting, taking orders, making small talk, ensuring everyone had what they needed. Skills I'd been developing my whole life, it turned out. Jordan stopped by most afternoons during their break, usually with coffee and updates from the outside world. They'd become more than a friend. They were my chosen family, the person who checked in on my well-being without expecting anything in return. Your sister called the diner looking for you, Jordan said one Thursday. Sliding into the corner booth where I was rolling silverware for the dinner rush. My heart jumped. Zoe? What did she say? She wanted to know if you were okay. Apparently, nobody's heard from you in a week. I'd been avoiding my phone, letting calls from Mom go to voicemail and responding to Zoe's texts with brief reassurances that I was fine. The truth was, I needed space to process everything that had happened without the constant pull of family drama. I should call her back, probably. But Talia, don't let them guilt you into taking care of their problems again. I won't. But even as I said it, I felt the familiar tug of responsibility. What if something was wrong? What if they really needed help? That evening, I called Zoe from my apartment, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall because I still didn't have proper furniture. Talia! Her voice was bright with relief. I was worried about you. I'm sorry, baby girl. I've been busy getting settled. How are you doing? Okay, I guess. School's fine. Madison and I are working on our history project about women in World War II. That sounds interesting. Yeah, it is. were focusing on the women who worked in factories, while the men were fighting. Rosie the Riveter and all that. I smiled at her enthusiasm. Even in the middle of family chaos, Zoe remained curious and engaged with the world around her. How are things at home? I asked, dreading the answer. Zoe's voice changed, becoming more careful. Different, quieter. Mom cries a lot when she thinks I'm not looking. And Eddie? I don't know. He seems happier, I guess. Like he got what he wanted. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. At 15, she was already learning to read adult motivations and power dynamics. Are you okay? Really okay? I asked. I miss you. The house doesn't feel right without you there. And ... And what? There's been some stuff with money. Bills and things. Mom keeps making phone calls and looking stressed. I felt the familiar clench of anxiety in my chest. What kind of bills? I don't know exactly, but I heard her talking to someone about the electric bill. And yesterday a man came to the door about the rent. The landlord. I've been wondering how long it would take for them to realize they couldn't make the payments without my contribution. Zoe, you don't need to worry about that stuff, okay? That's for the adults to figure out. But what if we have to move? What if I have to change schools? The fear in her voice was palpable. She was 15, supposed to be worried about homework and boys and which colleges to visit, not whether her family could keep their home. If that happens, we'll figure it out. But right now, you just focus on being a kid. I don't feel like a kid anymore. I know, honey. I'm sorry about that. After we hung up, I sat on my air mattress staring at my phone. 3 weeks of radio silence hadn't made their financial problems disappear. It had just meant they had to face them without my safety net. Part of me felt vindicated. Let them experience the stress and uncertainty I'd been managing for years. Let Eddie figure out how to be the man of the house when it came to actually providing for that house. But a larger part of me felt sick with worry about Zoe. She didn't choose any of this. She was caught in the middle of adult decisions and adult consequences, watching her family's stability crumble around her. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was getting ready for work when someone knocked on my door, unusual because people rarely came to the basement entrance. Through the peephole, I saw an older woman I didn't recognize, well-dressed and carrying a large handbag. "Are you Talia Ruiz?" she asked when I opened the door. "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm Elena Mendoza. I believe you know my daughter, Rosa." "My grandmother." Mom's mother, who lived in Miami and who I'd only spoken to a handful of times over the years. Abuela Elena? I stepped back, stunned. "May I come in?" I let her into my tiny apartment, suddenly self-conscious about the sparse furnishings and basement atmosphere. She looked around without judgment, taking in the air mattress, the single chair I'd bought at a thrift store, the hot plate that served as my entire kitchen. "You're living here now," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, since last month." "And before that, you were living with Rosa and her husband." "Yes," Elena nodded slowly, settling her handbag on my single chair. "Rosa called me last week. She's very upset. Says you left home suddenly and won't help with expenses anymore." I felt a flash of anger. Of course, Mom had called her mother for sympathy, presenting herself as the victim of my unreasonable behavior. "Did she tell you why I left?" "She said you needed space to grow up, to become independent." "That's one way to put it." Elena studied my face with sharp eyes that reminded me of Zoe's, intelligent, perceptive, unwilling to accept surface explanations. "Tell me your version." So I did. I told her about 3 years of paying rent and bills while working 2 jobs. About the packed suitcases on the porch and Eddie's dismissive attitude. About Mom's request that I continue paying their rent even after being kicked out. Elena listened without interruption, her expression growing progressively darker. Ay, Dios mío, she said finally. That girl learned nothing. What do you mean? Your mother has always looked for someone else to solve her problems. First your father, then you, now Eddie. She's never learned to stand on her own feet. The assessment was harsh but not inaccurate. I never thought about Mom's patterns in those terms, but Elena was right. Mom had always depended on others for financial and emotional stability. I was happy to help, I said. I wanted to take care of the family. Of course you did. You have a good heart. But taking care of family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself completely. Elena opened her handbag and pulled out an envelope. I have something for you. Inside was a letter written in Spanish in Elena's careful handwriting and a cashier's check. For $5,000. Abuela, I can't take this. Yes, you can, and you will. But listen to me, Nia. I've been watching this family for years, sending money when Rosa calls, crying about bills, helping however I can. But I never realized she was depending on you so completely. I stared at the check, overwhelmed by the generosity and the implications. Your mother made choices that hurt you, Elena continued. Choices that put her comfort ahead of your well-being. That's not acceptable. She said it was what was best for me. Best for her, maybe. Best for that husband of hers, not best for you. Elena stood up, smoothing her skirt. I'm going to see Rosa today to have a conversation about family responsibility and what it means to be a mother. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Someone needs to tell her the truth. After Elena left, I sat holding the check and the letter. The money represented freedom, the ability to buy real furniture, maybe even save for a car repair or emergency. Expenses, but more than that. It represented validation from someone who'd watched our family dynamics from the outside and recognized the unfairness of what had happened. The letter was even more meaningful. Written in the Spanish I'd been losing touch with since high school, it expressed Elena's pride in my character and her disappointment in her daughter's choices. She wrote about the importance of family, but also the importance of boundaries, about loving people without enabling their weaknesses. That afternoon at work, I couldn't concentrate. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Mom calling to complain about Elena's visit or to make new demands for financial support. Instead, it was a text from Zoe. Abuela Elena is here. She and Mom are having a very loud conversation. I'm hiding in my room, but I can hear everything. She's yelling at Mom in Spanish. I almost smiled despite everything. Elena had a reputation for not mincing words when she was disappointed in someone. Another text came an hour later. Abuela wants to talk to you. Can she call you tonight? That evening, Elena called from Mom's house. I could hear voices in the background, Mom crying, Eddie's deeper tones trying to mediate. How are you feeling, Mia? Elena asked, confused, grateful, a little overwhelmed. That's understandable. Today has been very emotional for everyone. How did it go with Mom? Elena sighed. About as well as expected. She's very defensive. Keeps insisting she did what was best for you. And what do you think? I think she's lying to herself because the truth is too painful to accept. Through the phone, I could hear Mom's voice rising, though I couldn't make out the words. She's arguing with Eddie now, Elena said. Apparently, he's not happy that I'm interfering in their family business. Are you okay there? Do you need to leave? I'm fine. I've been dealing with difficult people longer than you've been alive. There was a crash in the background, like something had been thrown or knocked over. What was that? Your mother just threw a coffee mug at the wall. She's having what we used to call a breakdown. The casual way Elena described the chaos made it clear she'd seen this before. Mom's tendency to explode when confronted with uncomfortable truths. Should I come over? No. This is between Rosa and me, but Talia. Yes, you did nothing wrong. You were a loving daughter who gave everything you had to your family. The fact that they couldn't appreciate that gift says everything about them and nothing about you. After Elena hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment thinking about gifts and appreciation, about the difference between being needed and being valued. For 3 years, I'd been needed essential to my family's survival. But I'd never been valued, never been seen as anything more than a convenient solution to their problems. The realization hurt, but it also felt liberating. I could stop trying to earn something that was never going to be offered freely. My phone rang again. This time it was Mom, her voice thick with tears and barely controlled hysteria. Talia, can you please come home? Elena's saying terrible things, and Eddie's threatening to leave, and I don't know what to do. The old me would have dropped everything and rushed over to fix the crisis. The new me, the one living in a basement apartment with $5,000 from her grandmother and a growing sense of her own worth, stayed put. I'm not coming over, Mom, but I need you. You needed me for 3 years, and you chose to send me away. That was different. No, it wasn't. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up and turned off my phone, then lay down on my mattress and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, my family was imploding. My mother was crying. My stepfather was angry. And my sister was probably hiding in her room wondering why all the adults in her life had lost their minds. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't going to fix it. The crisis at Mom's house stretched into a week-long family meltdown that I observed from the safe distance of my basement apartment. Zoe kept me updated through carefully timed texts, reporting the latest developments like a war correspondent embedded with enemy forces. Tuesday, Eddie slept on the couch. Mom cried through dinner. Abuela Elena is staying until Friday. Wednesday, Mom and Eddie had another fight about money. Something about the rent being late. Abuela made them sit down and look at actual bills. Thursday, Abuela took me shopping for school clothes. She said families shouldn't depend on children to be adults. Friday, Abuela's leaving tomorrow. She gave Mom an envelope and told her to make better choices. Mom won't stop crying. Saturday brought a knock on my door at 7 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw Mom standing on my doorstep, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, she said. About what? About fixing this. About you coming home. I leaned against the doorframe, not moving aside to let her enter. There's nothing to fix. You made your decision. I made a mistake. The admission should have felt like victory, but it just made me tired. Which mistake? Kicking me out or asking me to keep paying your bills afterward? Mom flinched. Both. All of it. Elena helped me see. She made me understand what I'd done. What had you done? I hurt my daughter. I chose my husband's pride over your well-being. It was the acknowledgement I'd been waiting for, but hearing it now felt hollow. Too little, too late. And what do you want me to do with that information? I want you to come home. I want us to be a family again. What about Eddie? Does he want me to come home? Mom's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He's adjusting to the idea. That's not an answer. He knows he was wrong. He's willing to apologize. Willing to apologize or willing to tolerate my presence because you can't make rent without me. It's not about money. It's always been about money, Mom. If I wasn't paying your bills, would you be here right now? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, unable to lie convincingly. That's what I thought. I started to close the door, but Mom put her hand against it. Talia, please, Zoe needs you. She's been so unhappy. Zoe is unhappy because you created an unstable situation that she had no control over. That's not my fault or my responsibility to fix. But you love her. Of course I love her. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling the people who hurt them. Mom's face crumpled. What can I do? How can I make this right? For a moment, I felt sorry for her. She looked lost and overwhelmed, like a child who'd broken something valuable and didn't know how to put it back together. You can start by taking responsibility for your own life instead of depending on other people to save you. I don't know how. Figure it out. The same way I'm figuring out how to live on my own. But I'm scared. So was I when you kicked me. Out. You'll survive. I closed the door gently but firmly, then leaned against it listening to Mom cry on the other side. Eventually, her footsteps retreated up the basement stairs and across the driveway. That afternoon, Elena called me. How are you holding up, Mia? I'm okay. Mom came by this morning. I figured she would. What did she say? That she wants me to come home, that she made a mistake. And what did you tell her? That it's too late for apologies motivated by financial necessity. Elena made a sound of approval. Good, you're learning. Learning what? That love without respect is just manipulation. The phrase hit home. That's exactly what my relationship with my family had been: love without respect, sacrifice without acknowledgement, devotion without reciprocation. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you intervene sooner? If you could see what was happening, why didn't you say something? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because I made the same mistakes with Rosa that she made with you. I enabled her, rescued her from consequences, taught her that someone else would always solve her problems. So this is generational. See? The women in our family have a history of giving too much and asking too little in return. How do we break the pattern? By doing exactly what you're doing. By choosing yourself for once. That evening, I used some of Elena's money to buy a reel, mattress, and box spring. Jordan helped me carry it down to the basement apartment, along with a small table and 2 chairs I'd found at a secondhand store. Look at you getting fancy, Jordan teased as we arranged the furniture. It's amazing what happens when you're not giving away your entire paycheck every month. How does it feel, having your own space, your own stuff? I considered the question while smoothing sheets onto my new mattress. Strange. Good, but strange. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I can't afford it or that I should spend the money on something more practical. That's the voice of someone who's been managing other people's priorities instead of their own. Is it always this hard? Learning to think about yourself first? I don't know. I never had to unlearn a lifetime of self-sacrifice. That night, I lay in my real bed in my own apartment, surrounded by furniture I'd chosen and paid for myself. The space felt more like home than anywhere. I'd lived in years that my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Eddie. We need to talk. I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. We have nothing to talk about. Your mother is falling apart. This isn't what I wanted. Then you shouldn't have asked her to choose between us. I never asked her to kick you out. You asked for space and privacy. What did you think that meant? I thought it meant you get your own place naturally, like other people your age. while continuing to pay your rent. There was a long pause before his next message. I didn't think about the money part. You didn't think about a lot of parts. Can we meet somewhere, talk in person? No, please. I want to apologize. Apologize for what specifically? Another long pause. For not appreciating what you did for our family. For making Rosa choose. For being an insecure asshole who felt threatened by a 24-year-old girl. The honesty of the admission surprised me. It was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from Eddie. Apology noted, I typed back. That's it? That's it. What can I do to fix this? Nothing. Some things can't be unfixed. I turned off my phone and tried to fall asleep, but Eddie's messages had stirred up emotions I'd been trying to suppress. Part of me wanted to believe his apology was genuine, that he'd learned something from this crisis, but a larger part of me recognized the pattern. Crisis leads to desperation. Desperation leads to apologies. Apologies lead to promises that things will be different. Until the next crisis, when the same dynamics emerge, because nothing fundamental has changed. I've been part of that cycle for 3 years, rescuing them from consequences and enabling their dependence. Breaking free meant accepting that they might fail without me, and that their failure was not my responsibility. The next morning brought another text from Zoe. Can I come see you today? Please? I need to get out of here. I called her back immediately. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine, but everyone here is crazy. Mom keeps crying, Eddie keeps apologizing to walls, and I feel like I'm living in a soap opera. Where do you want to meet? Can I come to your place? I want to see where you're living. An hour later, Zoe arrived carrying a backpack and looking older than her 15 years. I gave her the tour of my tiny apartment, which took approximately 30 seconds. It's small, she said diplomatically, but it's mine. Yeah, I can feel that. It feels peaceful. We sat at my small table drinking hot chocolate I'd made on the hot plate. Zoe seemed nervous, fidgeting with her cup and avoiding eye contact. What's really going on? I asked. They want me to convince you to come home. Both of them? Mom does. Eddie says he wants you to come back, but I can tell he doesn't really mean it. And what do you want? Zoe looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I want you to be happy, even if that means you don't live with us anymore. The maturity of her response broke my heart. At 15, she was already learning to separate her own needs from her desires for other people. Thank you for saying that. But I also want to visit you, regularly, not just when there's a family crisis. I'd love that. You're welcome here anytime. Even if Mom and Eddie don't like it, especially then. Zoe smiled for the first time since arriving. Good, because I might need somewhere to escape to while they figure out their mess. What kind of mess? Money stuff, mostly. They can't afford the rent without your help, but Eddie's too proud to get a second job or ask his family for money. What do you think will happen? Probably we'll have to move somewhere cheaper, which means I'll have to change schools. The casual way she accepted. This possibility showed how much chaos she'd already absorbed in her young life. How do you feel about that? Scared, but also kind of relieved. Maybe a fresh start would be good for everyone. We spent the afternoon talking about her school project, her friends, her plans for junior year. Normal sisterly conversation that felt precious because it wasn't overshadowed by family drama or financial stress. When it was time for her to go home, she hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, she said, for standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you too, for being so strong through all of this. I learned from watching you. After she left, I sat in my small apartment thinking about the conversation. Zoe's resilience and maturity were remarkable, but they were also heartbreaking. She was 15 years old, worried about changing schools because her parents couldn't manage their finances without their eldest daughter's support. The cycle was continuing, but at least now Zoe could see it for what it was. Maybe that awareness would help her make different choices. When it was her turn to build a family. My phone rang as the sun was setting. Mom's number appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then Elena's number appeared. Hola, abuela. Mia, I'm at the airport flying back to Miami. I wanted to check on you before I left. I'm okay. Zoe came to visit today. Good. She needs to see that you're thriving, not just surviving. Am I thriving? You're learning to. That's the first step. Elena, what happens now? With Mom and Eddie and all their problems? They'll figure it out or they won't. Either way, it's not your responsibility anymore. And if they lose the house, if Zoe has to move, then Zoe will learn what you learned, that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you fail, and you have to learn to protect yourself. It was a hard truth, but not a wrong one. Will you stay in touch? I asked. I mean, more than just Christmas cards, of course. You're my granddaughter, and I'm proud of the woman you're becoming. After Elena hung up, I made dinner on my hot plate and ate at my small table while reading a book I checked out from the library. Simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after years of rushing between jobs and family obligations. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Chun's grandson practicing violin again, the same scales he worked on every evening. The repetitive nature of practice, doing the same thing over and over until it became natural, reminded me of what I was doing with my life, learning to choose myself, learning to set boundaries, learning to let other people face the consequences of their own decisions. Like playing scales, it would take practice, but eventually it might become as natural as breathing. 3 months after moving into my basement apartment, I finally felt like I was living my own life instead of just surviving someone else's crisis. The tiny space had become home in a way the house on Maple Street never quite managed. Every object was chosen by me. Every decision was mine to make. Jordan stopped by on a rainy Thursday evening, carrying takeout from the Thai place downtown, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my grocery budget for the week. What's the occasion? I asked, letting them in from the cold. Your 3-month independence anniversary. I thought it deserved celebrating. We sat at my small table eating pad thai and drinking wine that tasted like celebration and possibility. Jordan had become more than a friend over these months. They were the family I'd chosen. The person who showed up without being asked and stayed without expecting anything in return. So, Jordan said, refilling our glasses, I have news. Good news or bad news? Good news, great news actually. The graphic design thing is really taking off. I'm getting enough freelance work that I might be able to quit the diner. I felt a stab of something that might have been panic. You're leaving? Not leaving, evolving. And I was wondering if you might want to evolve too. What do you mean? Jordan pulled out their phone and showed me a website. There's a community college program in social work, part-time evening classes. You could keep working days and take classes at night. I stared at the screen, reading about admission requirements and course descriptions. Social work, the dream I'd set aside 3 years ago when family obligations took priority. I can't afford college. Actually, you probably can. With Pell Grants and the money your grandmother gave you, plus working part-time, I ran some numbers. Jordan pulled out a piece of paper covered with calculations, tuition cost, living expenses, potential financial aid. They'd done research, created a budget, mapped out a possible future. Why would you do this? Because I've watched you take care of everyone else for months. I thought it was time someone took care of you. The kindness of it overwhelmed me. Someone had been paying attention to my dreams, thinking about my potential, planning for my success. What if I'm not smart enough? I've been out of school for 6 years. You managed household finances for 3 years while working 2 jobs. You're plenty smart enough. What if I fail? What if you don't? That weekend, I drove to the community college campus and walked around the buildings where classes would be held. Students my age and older hurried between buildings carrying backpacks and textbooks, looking focused and purposeful in a way I envied Dot in the admissions office. I picked up application materials and financial aid forms. The paperwork felt both thrilling and terrifying documentation of a life. I might be brave enough to claim Dot Sunday brought my weekly visit with Zoe, now a regular tradition that happened regardless of family drama. She met me at our usual coffee shop, looking more relaxed than she had in months. "How are things at home?" I asked. "Better, actually. We moved last week." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You moved? Where?" "A duplex on the east side. It's smaller than the old place, but Mom can afford it on her grocery store salary. And Eddie got a steady job at the hardware store." "How do you feel about the new place?" Zoe shrugged. "It's fine. Different, but fine. And I didn't have to change schools because Madison's mom said she could drive me until the end of the year." The casual way she discussed this major upheaval showed how much she'd adapted to uncertainty over the past few months. "Are Mom and Eddie doing better?" "Yeah, I think so. They seem more, I don't know, equal maybe? Like they're both contributing instead of Mom depending on someone else to save her." "That's good." "Mom asks about you sometimes. She wants to know if you're okay." "What do you tell her?" "That you're more than okay. That you seem happy." "Am I happy?" Zoe studied my face with her characteristic intensity. "Yeah, I think you are. You look different. More relaxed or something." She was right. The constant tension I'd carried for years, the weight of other people's problems on my shoulders, had gradually lifted. I still worried about my family, but it was the normal concern of love rather than the crushing responsibility of enablement. "Zoe, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm thinking about going back to school. Community college to study social work." Her face lit up. "Really? That's amazing." "I'm scared I'm too old or that I've forgotten how to be a student." "You're 24. That's not old. And you helped me with homework for years. You're great at learning things." The confidence in her voice was startling. When had my little sister become so wise? "Would you be proud of me?" "If I went back to school?" "I'm already proud of you. For everything you've done, for taking care of yourself, for teaching me that I don't have to fix everyone else's problems." "Is that what I taught you?" "That and more. You taught me that love doesn't mean sacrificing everything for other people. That families should lift each other up, not drag each other down." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You learned all that from watching me make mistakes?" "I learned it from watching you stop making mistakes." That evening, I sat in my apartment filling out college application forms. The questions seemed designed for traditional students, 18-year-olds fresh from high school with clear career goals and family support. I struggled with how to explain my gap years, my unconventional path, my reasons for choosing social work. In the personal statement section, I wrote about growing up fast, about learning to navigate systems and advocate for family needs. I wrote about understanding poverty from the inside, about the dignity of people who work multiple jobs to survive. I wrote about wanting to help other families find stability without anyone having to sacrifice their own dreams. Reading it back, I realized I hadn't been wasting the last 3 years. I'd been getting an education in exactly the field I wanted to enter. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the admissions office. My application had been accepted for the spring semester. Jordan insisted on taking me out to celebrate, choosing a restaurant nicer than anywhere I'd eaten in years. Over dinner, they raised their glass in a toast to new beginnings and reclaimed dreams. To friends who see potential when you can't see it. Yourself, I countered. To the fact that it's never too late to choose yourself. The next day, I called Elena to share the news. Mia, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I'm scared, I admitted. What if I'm not good at it? What if I can't handle school and work? You've been handling impossible things for years. This is just a different kind of challenge. Will you tell Mom? Elena was quiet for a moment. Do you want me to? I don't know. Part of me wants her to know I'm doing well, that her decision led to something positive. But part of me doesn't want her to think this justifies what she did. Those are both valid feelings. What would you do? I would focus on my own life and let other people manage their own reactions. It was exactly the advice I needed to hear. The first day of classes arrived gray and cold. Typical January weather that made everything feel like a test of determination. I sat in Introduction to Social Work feeling ancient among the traditional college students, but also grateful for the life experience that had brought me here. The professor, Dr. Martinez, started class by asking why we'd chosen social work. To help people, most students answered. To make a difference. To give back to my community. When she got to me, I hesitated. To help people navigate systems that aren't designed for them. And to make sure families don't have to choose between individual dreams and collective survival. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. That's the kind of specific motivation that will carry you through the difficult cases. After class, I walked to my car feeling like I belonged somewhere for the first time in months. Not because someone needed me there, but because I'd chosen to be there. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Zoe told me about school. I'm proud of you. I read the message twice before responding. Thank you. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that's enough. That evening, I sat at my small table doing homework reading about family systems theory and trauma-informed care. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was studying concepts I'd been living for years, but understanding. Something academically felt different from surviving it personally. I was learning language for experiences I'd never been able to articulate, frameworks for patterns I'd intuited but couldn't explain. My phone rang. Zoe's number. How was your first day? She asked immediately. Good. Overwhelming, but good. I'm so excited for you. You're going to help so many people. I hope so. I know so. You've been helping people your whole life. Now you'll just get paid for it and have fancy degrees to hang on your wall. After we hung up, I looked around my tiny basement apartment, my real mattress, my thrift store furniture, my textbooks spread across the table. It wasn't much by most standards, but it was mine. Every object represented a choice I'd made, a boundary I'd set, a step toward the life I actually wanted. Outside, Mrs. Chun's grandson was practicing violin again, working through the same challenging passage he'd been struggling with for weeks. Tonight, for the first time, he played it perfectly, all the practice finally paying off in a moment of clear, beautiful music. I opened my textbook and started reading about resilience theory, about how people adapt and grow through adversity, about how the strongest families are often those who've learned to support individual growth rather than demanding conformity. Some patterns can be broken. Some cycles can be interrupted. Some stories can be rewritten. The house on Maple Street. would always be part of my history, but it no longer defined my future. That future was spread out on my table in the form of syllabi and assignment sheets, and the distant promise of a degree that would let me help other families find their way through crisis. I had learned to choose myself. Now I could help others learn the same lesson. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.